to another tutorial video. So this one is a little bit different. My lovely friend and viewer Lourdes sent me some gorgeous goodies, and in with the goodies was this set of Embark fabrics from Tim Holtz. I think they're his Eclectic Elements sort of range of fabrics, and Simon Says Stamp had done like some small little fat quarters of them that you could buy in packets, and she very kindly sent me a couple of packets of them. So obviously I'm keeping one brand new and whole for some bigger projects that I might do later down the line, but I thought, well, this is the perfect opportunity to kind of show some different ways of using fabric in your card making if you've never thought to use fabric before. So there are 6 gorgeous designs. There's this beautiful map one, which I've used a couple of pieces of, one to make a thank you card for Lourdes. Then there's this beautiful like old rusty kind of sign one, which again I've used a small section to do some ripped pieces. There's this beautiful like old tapestry floral kind of one, which I've created this little canvas out of, which is on one of the cards I'll show you. This one I haven't actually used a piece of yet, but it's beautiful. It's got like blueprints and all sorts of gorgeous like graph paper and ledger paper in the background, and different tiles and stuff. And like, I think the nice thing about getting little fat quarters of it rather than having to buy it by the metre as well, obviously it's perfect for us card makers, but you're going to get random sections. So I haven't opened the other packet, but I'm sure the pieces in the other packet are going to look different to the pieces that are in this packet as well. Then there's also this gorgeous piece here, which has got all sorts of logos and stuff on here. I'm thinking the card I'm going to show you how to make, I think I'm going to use this piece because I think it's going to fit perfectly onto the die that I want to use. And then there's also this gorgeous like old postmarks one, which I think would work fabulously with some of Francoise's like old vintage postage kind of themed stamps that she's done in her woodware range as well. I think it would work really nicely. But I've got a couple of cards to show you of different ways how I've used it, and then I thought I would show you how to kind of like, I don't know, not really stabilise, because we're not like using a proper fabric stabiliser, but how to mount this onto some double-sided adhesive and then die cut it and then use it to create a 3D element on your card. And I think this piece just here is going to work perfectly for that. So I'm going to leave that piece out and put all of these pieces away, and then I'll show you the cards that I've created. So obviously I had to make a thank you card for Lourdes, so it's a bit of fluff on there. I've used this really cool canvas die. So these are from Jamie Rogers from Creative Expressions. He bought them out ages ago, and he has actually got bigger ones out now that come with a word inside them. So if you see a set that has a scripty word in it, they're the larger shapes, and then these ones are 2 of the original shapes that I had. I really should get some more of them, but I do love this kind of style of them, because the hexagons you could use 3 on a card and make like a lovely tessellating sort of pattern, but this sort of, what is he calling it, an octagon, it's like an irregular octagon, is a really nice size for the small sort of cards that I like to make. So I've really been enjoying this one. This is the one I'm going to use to show you how to create a card as well. But yeah, this is the card that I decided to make for Lourdes because she's from the US. It also has the kind of area that she lives in on this part of the map, which was obviously just by luck because you just get a random piece of the map. So I thought I had to just cut it into a canvas and turn it into a card for her. And then the background on this, she also sent me the full set of the retired colours of the distress paints that Tim Holtz has. And I'd never tried distress paints before. So I used a few matching colours in the background of this, and there will be multiple more tutorials coming up with distress paints because I have been having so much fun playing with them, and I can't wait to do some tutorials. Some are going to be tutorials of some Tim Holtz kind of techniques that he's done in the past, and then other ones will just be like playing with it and stuff. But I've really been enjoying the paints as well. And so this is the card that I decided to make for her. I'm not sure if it's her style, but it went with the vintagey kind of feel of the map, so hopefully she likes it, and obviously she'll have it by the time I put this video out as well. Then the other card I've done with the little canvas, I've used a Tim Holtz die in the background for just like a random pattern. I don't know whether these cards are exactly my usual style, but I did quite like incorporating the fabric elements into here and kind of like thinking up different ways of using bits and pieces. And I also went through my stash and pulled out a couple of dyes that I hadn't used in a while or hadn't had a chance to use yet as well. So I've used one of Tim Holtz little birds on here as well, and then used my Dymo labeler to do Thinking of You, but just to kind of pull the colours together. And I felt like this gorgeous florally kind of one it's got like olive green kind of tones in it, but it kind of lent itself nicely to the satin gold mirror card. So that's why I decided to sort of pull all that together. But you could have done 3 of these and had 3 of them on a smaller card as well. They are quite proud from the card. I think they're about 5mm, the depth on them. So obviously this is more if you're posting a small parcel or if you're going to hand deliver it maybe, because this wouldn't go through on a normal postage stamp in the UK. You'd have to do a large, you know, like 1 inch thick kind of parcel. But that is the second card that I've done using Jamie's canvases, the little dies. Then I just thought I'd show you some other ways of using the fabric. This one, I don't know if I like it as much, but I decided to cut out some of those postmark elements on here, and I just sort of placed them back onto the card. So this one had a sort of section of a couple of circles and an actual stamp on here as well. And then this bit, I didn't want to cut into this and come back out again, so I just ripped it along this edge and did that lovely raw edge on there. His fabrics, I did watch his video, but I can't remember how he described them now, but his fabrics are thinner than canvas but thicker than like a normal polycotton, so you can kind of tear them. You do have to start it with a pair of scissors, and they do fray really nicely as well, so they work really well for just like cutting around as well. You don't actually have to use fray check on them, so even though they do fray, which I kind of just contradicted myself there, but they do fray when you pull the threads out, but they're quite like a stiff weave that if you stick them down quick enough after you've cut them out, they don't seem to fray too much around the edge, so you don't have to go to the effort of putting fray check all the way around before you cut it out and everything. But really different kind of way of using fabric maybe on a card to sort of cut bits out of it. And I also pulled out the butterflies of Tim Holtz. Have all those little extra elements on there because I hadn't used those before, and so I just layered them up, cut it out of a cream coloured cardstock to kind of match the creaminess of the fabric, layered them up, took out a woodware stamp because Francoise loves her postmarks and she has a couple of different postmark kind of sets, and obviously it goes perfectly with this, so I just stamped some portions using some Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide, because I thought that kind of matched the postage stamp that's in here as well. And then I used a bit of gathered twigs and aged mahogany to add in those sort of red and brown elements that were also on the fabric as well. And then I did a little bit of watercolouring because I thought like the background looked a little bit too plain after I'd stuck it on. So a little bit of wiggly lines like postage kind of marks, a couple of circles to sort of represent another postage mark up there as well, and a bit of splattering. And then obviously a Dymo label as the sentiment on it. So I'm not 100% sure I like this one, but it's a different kind of style. And the main point of the video is just to show you a few different ways of how to use your fabric. So this is like die cutting your fabric. This is hand cutting in more of like a neat sort of fashion. And then I've done 2 where I have torn them. So this is another piece of the map, but it was a slightly more boring area of the map. It was mostly the sea. So I just pulled it into a square, ripped off lots of the edges to get this sort of frayed kind of effect. It's quite a neat sort of fraying effect. You don't get really like sometimes when you pull a polycotton and you're trying to tear it along the grain of it, it does that bunching up kind of thing. It doesn't do that as much on this kind of a fabric. It's quite forgiving when you sort of pull all the bits out, and you get like almost like burlap or hessian or something when you fray it on the edges. It's quite like a neat sort of fray. So I just did a square of that. I used the tiny attacher in a couple of different areas to attach it into place. And then this is a Seth Apter die from Spellbinders from years ago. I love these kind of focal element dies. And I recently bought a few more of them because I found them, I can't remember what website it was now, but they were like £5 or £6 each. And there was a few that I didn't get when they originally came out all those years ago. So I got a couple more of the different kind of designs. And I just kept it in a white hammer finish card. So the background is a smooth finish. Then this is a white hammer finish. This was a Sizzix scribbly one, again from that hammer finish. And then this is a Sizzix butterfly die, a Tim Holtz one. And I've just layered it up again in that hammer kind of finish. So it's quite simple in the colour palette because it's mostly just got the map on here. But I mean, you can match the colours of the map if you want to and do something more like this. And I did have I had a watercolour piece left after doing this one with the brush strokes. I had a watercolour one left, so I could have maybe cut the butterfly out of that to add more colour into it as well. But yeah, I just wanted to show you simple sort of ways of using these on your cards. So that's cutting it into, or ripping it into a square. And then this one I think is my favourite. This is using that sign kind of one. And this fabric actually did not rip like messily, but it gave a lot more frayed kind of elements when I tore this one into pieces, which I really like the look of. So I did 3 little strips, again attaching it with the tiny attacher, although on this one I did use Cosmic Shimmer glue, and that stuck it down really nicely as well. It hasn't like seeped through the weave of the fabric, and it doesn't show on the top of it, which is nice. But yeah, I did the tiny attacher to attach it down, so a lot of this is like a little bit loose still, which is just a nice sort of messy kind of look. That's another one of the CRaFTi dies as well. I've still got the packaging of them here actually. The square one I'd used was this one, which is the roadmap. Oh, isn't that funny? I didn't even look at what the name was, but I used it. When I cut it out, I did think actually this looks like a map that would work on there. And then the other one is called Triplex, the circle one. So I really like these kind of dies, and they're the perfect size for a small card. They just add a nice focal element behind them. I remember I did a sped up video years ago, I think it was Easter cards, and I used the one that's like a circle with drippy elements coming down on it, and I used lawn fawn stamps in the middle, and it looks really good. So I must remember to use these kind of dies more because I do absolutely love them, but I'm always doing videos with new things that have just come out, so it's kind of hard to, you know, mix them in. But I'm determined for the rest of this year and going onwards, I'm determined to do more videos using things from my stash and just showing you more techniques and not just focusing on this is a new release, that's a new release and stuff like that. So hopefully you'll enjoy that kind of content as well. But anyway, this is the last one that I did, and I'd just done a Dymo label sentiment as well, and I also shadowed this with a gold mirror card because I thought the kind of rusty colours that are in the letters on here is more on the golder kind of side, so it worked really nicely. And I used a dark brown card for this, although the background of this, those old signs, it's kind of like on the purpley side of brown, but this does still go with it as well, and I think even if you just use a black it would have looked nice as well. But yeah, I just thought some different ways of using fabric onto your cards, and it's all down to the lovely Lourdes who sent me that Embark collection of Tim Holtz fabrics. So I'm going to move these bits away, get myself sorted, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how you can die cut your little canvases out of your fabrics in a way that's going to keep them sort of pliable enough to sort of fold them and get those creases on there. And then I'll also show you how to put them together and not have them squash in the centre. You can see it's quite a firm little canvas in there, so it's got foam tape underneath this. It does make it slightly more on the heavy side, but it really supports that little canvas as well. So I'll be back in 1 second. So first of all, when you're picking your area of your fabric, the nice thing about these dies is there's actually excess metal before the fold line. So even if you can't quite see what you want inside your canvas, you can see that banker's word looks like it's only just going to fit, but because we've got those like probably 4mm extra with the like couple on each side, that the whole word should fit on the front of the canvas. I'm hoping it will anyway. But basically what you want to do first is take some scissors. Actually, I should use my little Tim Holtz ones that came in the tin because they're for fabric. So you want to kind of roughly see how much fabric you're going to need. For these canvas dies, technically you don't need fabric to go on these last tabs because that's what sticks it underneath to the card, but I'm still going to do the fabric all over just to make sure it's nice and secure and that it die cuts nicely. So I want to make sure that that is going to be in the centre and I've got enough fabric to cover that whole die. So I'm going to come up here and cut round there. I might even move that down slightly so that I don't cut into that, because that navy ribbon wording might be nice to use on another project. So I'm going to cut along here, and actually that NR looks good too, and carefully make sure this stays in a good position and then just trim around. There we go. And I'll just make sure to avoid that word so that I could use that on another project at some point as well. And actually, when I was looking at this, you know the tonic Helter Skelter that came out recently, this is kind of making me think of like a circus or some kind of fun fair that would have rides and stuff like that. So you could even use this kind of stuff in one of your three-dimensional tonic dies as well, you know, to create a cool pattern around the outside of something. So once we've got our piece like this, we want to take a piece of printer paper, so just really thin printer paper, because we're going to put some double-sided tape behind the fabric onto the printer paper, so it's not going to then be sticky, but it's just going to reinforce the fabric, and having a piece of paper behind it is going to help the die cut through it better. And then because you've got the paper on there and the double-sided adhesive, it's going to make it a little bit more sturdy to be able to fold it and actually glue it into that kind of canvas sort of shape. So first of all, we're just going to see sort of roughly how big this is. This is the Craft Perfect roll of double-sided tape, and I think we should, if I double check with this, oh, that's going to be a bit tight. I think I'm going to go that way then. So I'm just going to take the double-sided sheet, stick it onto the printer paper. I actually like to, instead of using my scissors that then get gunked up with a load of sticky from cutting through things, these little knives that Tonic do, I think they're blue now rather than the orange colour, they actually cut through really nicely through the tape. So I like to just use that to trim it off at the moment. That's my favourite way of doing it. Then burnish this into position onto the printer paper. Then peel the backing off, take our piece of fabric and stick that down nice and flat so we're securing it really nicely. You can use the backing of this to press it down, and also don't throw away the backing of this because you can use this to make your Nuvo drops on. You can pre-make your Nuvo drops onto this, or you can just use it as a paint palette as well. You can put acrylic paint on it and use it as a paint palette. But it's always handy to have. And then once we've got the double-sided behind the fabric and it's all really nicely stuck down all around the edges, I'm just going to come back in with this knife again and just cut up to those edges, trying not to cut into it too much, but I just did then. But I know I've got a bit extra on that side, so just cutting all the way around because we don't want any exposed double-sided tape showing when we die cut, otherwise it'll stick to our cutting plate. And we can just trim all the way around, taking all that excess off. And then get rid of that. And now we can place our die onto here, and we should be able to get the perfect placement that we want. So remember, we have still got a couple of millimetres either side of this, but we want to make sure that the word still looks central, even though we know we've got a couple of millimetres. As long as it looks central inside that centre portion, it should still be central because there's equal distance from the edge of the metal to the cutting edge on both sides of the die. So I think that looks pretty good, and it looks nice and straight. And then you just want to take some of your low tack tape, or you can use a stronger tape really if you're sticking it to fabric, it doesn't really matter, to hold that into position. Then we can bring our die cutting machine in. I've got the Tonic Tangerine, and put this onto your plate and run it through, and it's probably not going to cut through completely because we are cutting through fabric, and because it's that slightly thicker kind of fabric, it's got heavier duty kind of fibres to it, so it's probably not going to completely cut through. But we can easily use our scissors to trim off any little areas that haven't cut through. But also having that paper on the back of it will really help sort of stabilise it and make the die cut it better than if you just cut the fabric as well. So this one, I think both of them actually have very skinny little pieces between like the edge of the canvas and that little triangular glue tab on there as well. So you can kind of tease it away and see if it's cut nicely. Some areas usually cut better than others. It probably depends on where the weave of the fabric has hit the cutting edge of the die, but basically all you need to do is just come back in with those little scissors and just snip into that to remove any areas where it's just caught on a tiny little fibre of the fabric and hasn't completely cut through. Can just snip, oops, can just snip those little pieces away. It's literally just like a tiniest little bit in a couple of different areas. It's better to snip it even if it doesn't completely need it to be snipped than to just pull it and then risk like, you know, ruining that little bit of fabric that you've used. I think this would look really nice with Christmassy fabrics as well. If you have like Christmas polycottons or anything in your stash, I think it would look really good with those. I also like this fabric. The reason why I thought to use it with Jamie's canvas dies is because it is that thicker quality kind of a fabric. It really reminds me of canvas. It's got a proper prominent kind of weave to it that really reminds me of actual canvas for a real canvas. So we've trimmed off all of the excess now. I'll just show you that weave of the fabric actually. It's a really gorgeous weave, and you can see that B just fits on there and the S just fits on the other side. So it was like the perfect wording to go on this little canvas. So now we've got it all cut, we want to carefully fold all of the score lines and burnish them with our glide folder. And this is really going to help it have a nice, crisp, professional kind of look as well. So we can fold all of these around. I'll speed this bit up so you don't have to watch me in real time fold all of these. Okay, so now we've got all of that folded, you can see how nicely it kind of holds those creases, whereas if it was just the fabric, all of this would have started to fray because it wouldn't have been held in place with that double-sided adhesive. So now you can kind of see how this is going to come together. They're really easy to put together, his little canvas dies, and they do have instructions in the packaging, pretty sure they do. It's either instructions or inspiration, and you can also use them backwards if you want to, and use the extra dies that you get in there to cut a little frame to go around them. But you can see he's shown how to like die cut photographs as well, which I think looks really lovely, and you can do all sorts with these little kind of shapes. But maybe you don't get instructions, but I suppose this is kind of showing you the different ways that you can kind of use it and how they'll tessellate together. But really, really easy to put together. It's literally just gluing these little glue tabs. So we've got some Cosmic Shimmer glue and then some little pegs as well. And you're literally just going to go round gluing those tiny little triangular glue tabs together. And then the way you kind of have to do it is you have to sort of fold over that final glue tab, which we'll use in a minute to attach it all together, and then you can peg it. If you fold that one over, you can actually peg it into position to get that to hold really nicely. But the good thing is Cosmic Shimmer glue is really great for gluing onto fabric as well. So Obviously you don't want to get too much on the front if you can help it, but it does hold fabric really nicely. So we can just, you want to make sure they're nice and tightly in those little glue tabs, so it's going to give a nice crisp actual canvas kind of look when you've put it all together. Okay, so now we've let those dry with the pegs on, we can now remove all those little pegs that are holding it all together. And then the next step is the kind of cheats way of getting this to be a really sturdy little canvas on your project. And obviously this doesn't have to just be on a card, it can be a proper little home decor piece. Maybe you're creating like a little vignette or like mini room or a diorama or something, and you want it to be like a little eclectic room with all sorts of different bits and pieces that have been you know, assembled over years and stuff. You can have like this as a little canvas in the back of it. If you do like dolls' houses as well, you could make them into little canvases to go on the wall in a doll's house too. So there's so many different ways of using them. It doesn't just have to be on your card making. So the next thing to do is, you can see how it's already holding its shape nicely, and we do need to glue these final pieces, but before we do that we're going to actually fill the inside with foam tape. Now to get this to be the right height, I think I used 3 layers of this foam tape. This is, I think it's like 1.9mm or something in height, this one, and I think this is about 6mm for the depth of this canvas. Yeah, it looks like it. So it's either going to be 3 or 4 thicknesses of this, but what we can do is we can layer up 3 thicknesses first, and then if it's not quite thick enough we can layer up a 4th thickness on top as well. So it does use quite a bit of foam tape to sort of support the inside of this, but it's definitely worth it, because I think you would rather your recipient get the card with an actual 3-dimensional canvas on it rather than a squashed canvas from the post as well. So we can take one long strip and go along the centre, and now I will be able to tell you if it's 3 or 4 layers of foam tape. And I think it was 4 layers. Yeah, it's 4 layers of foam tape. So we'll just add another layer onto that as well. Just means it's going to be really lovely and supported. So we can stick that down. You can kind of test to see if it's enough foam tape, because you can push these down, and if they go in like downwards too far, then you know that you're going to need another layer of foam tape on there. But I think 4 should be sufficient. That's like the perfect width there. So now you can just fill in the back as much as you want. I do recommend that one going all the way across there. We can add another layer of foam tape to this little triple stacked piece that we've already got, so we can we don't have to keep cutting pieces twice. You know, we've got it all in one piece then. And I think maybe if we cut this lengthways, we can place one either side going right up to the edge of that canvas to support that edge. You don't have to like completely fill the entire cavity with the foam tape, but it's quite nice to just have supporting areas. So if we then try and make some triangular pieces to go in the corners, so we've got a little piece here which should be enough. We place that on, trim it off, so we've got 2 layers, pull the backing off, place it on again, trim it off, we've got 3 layers, and then take the backing off, place it on again, then we've got our 4 layers of foam tape. And then I think to get those to be nice pieces to sort of fit into there, perhaps if we go like this and cut it diagonally and get ourselves some little triangular wedges of foam tape, then we can put those in like so along those edges to sort of fill in the gaps nicely. We might have to trim if they don't quite fit, because it kind of depends what angle you've cut them at. I think those 2 will fit in the bottom corners though. And that one, and then this final one. There we go. So we've now sort of infilled that back piece. Then we can take off the backing of these two long edges and fold them over, stick them down. Then we can take off that backing of that middle piece and stick those two end pieces down. I'm doing it like this so it's easier for sticking in a second with glue to make all of these pieces join. And now we can go in and take those little triangular pieces off. Then we can get a little bit of our Cosmic Shimmer glue, put it on those little corners. It's going to help those final pieces stick down really nicely because they'll overlap a little bit as they wrap round to the back of the canvas. Okay, and then we can press that into position. It's going to grab onto the foam tape and stick onto the glue. I'm sure he does loads of different shapes in these canvases as well, so you can just get like regular squares. I think there is a triangular one that you can get as well. I don't think there's any circles or ovals because I think they would be far too difficult, but I'm sure that you can get like rectangles and squares and things as well. So lots of different shapes that you could use for these kind of projects. And there you have your finished little canvas, which if I get a piece of card, you can see how nicely it fits onto a smaller card like this. You could just about fit it portrait ways as well if you want to, and then you can sort of build up a background to put it onto or leave it on the blank background. I think with these Tim Holtz fabrics, because they have got that vintage kind of feel to them, they look a little bit stark just against a white background. So you could, I don't tend to like cards that I make when I use like a cream cardstock or an off-white cardstock. I do love a white background. So I think for me, instead of like using something more vintage looking for the background, I think I just keep the white but add in some colours. So for example, this looks a little bit like it could have a bit of hickory smoke, a bit of pumice stone, maybe some frayed burlap in it. You could just do a little bit of ink blending in the background and try and recreate this grungy kind of look, and then add that one on top of it as well. I think that would look really lovely. But I just thought it's a different tutorial to kind of show you, and I get to use something wonderful that one of my lovely viewers and friends sent me to use as well. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial video showing you how to use some fabric in a few different ways for your card projects, whether you want to go with some of Jamie Rogers' canvas craft dies, or whether you want to use just like torn pieces in strips in a square, or use your scissors and actually like fussy cut around the designs in the fabric as well. Just thought it's a nice little tutorial to show you. So really hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye!